Thank you, Professor Nemenzo. Our speakers may appear very different, but when you listen to them, they have many similarities. Both are practitioners and parts of social movements. Both have different takes and more or less similar ideas of how social movements would more or less prosper. But before we reflect on our own thoughts about what they just said, maybe we can invite the audience to have questions, and for those of you who are willing to ask questions, may we ask you to introduce yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was not able to listen to the first part of your presentation, Dr. Sayyid, but I got the last part. There is this impression, especially from the outside, that while Dr. Nemenzo mentioned about the spontaneity of the Arab revolt, there is also the perspective that what transpired is simply a kind of a bandwagon kind of, struggle, triggered by that self-immolation by Muhammad Ghazali. In other words, people were questioning if that self-immolation didn't happen, the Arab revolt would have not happened as early as we have seen. Apart from the observation of a kind of a bandwagon developed in the Arab world, there are some external developments, however, that are equally important. Especially so, two developments, or probably three developments. One, the U.S. retreat from Iraq. And the other one, quite earlier, the alleged death of Osama bin Laden that happened within the time frame of this Arab revolution. Were these developments simply coincidence into the Arab revolt? Or is there a connection, for instance, with this Arab revolt into the larger geopolitical project of the United States, such that since there is already the Arab Spring, then they don't need, the United States does not need Osama bin Laden to serve as, the boogeyman or the justification for the continued presence of the United States in many parts of the Muslim world. Concomitant with that was the declaration very recently of the United States to transfer the fulcrum of its presence not in the Middle East or Afghanistan, but here in Southeast Asia, in accordance with the so-called America's Pacific Century Project of the United States. So these notions of external elements that have probably transpired or have shaped the Arab revolt cannot simply be dismissed as something that is irrelevant. So that while probably it is important to look at the specific case of revolution in each and every Arab country, we cannot deny the fact of the presence of a bigger geopolitical force that practically hover or in fact maneuver everything happening in the Arab world and elsewhere. Thank you very much.
From Arena Philippines and Asian Center. Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Mustafa Kamal Al-Sayyid for your most enlightening and highly informative discussion. I learned a lot in your discussion from your presentation this morning. I have three comments. One is a question, but the two others are just some insights. On the point of the old versus new social movements, I'm familiar with this dichotomy between old social movements and new social movements. But all along I also thought that between the old and the new there is actually some kind of an intersection. You have two circles, old and new, and somehow at some point there will be an intersection where there will be common forces, elements, or even groups that would straddle both old and new social movements. But in your presentation, however, I get the impression that there is no intersection between the old and the new, and that the two are diametrically opposed, except on only one point, the ouster of Mubarak, but that has already taken place. So is it now the case that that small intersection between the old and the new has disappeared, and the two are now going their separate ways? My second point has to do with a perplexing question in my mind. Whatever happened to the Egyptian left? I understand there used to be a strong force even during the time of Gamal Abdel Nasser, but I understand Nasser bore down heavily and suppressed the communist movement in Egypt, practically paralyzed and demobilized the Egyptian Communist Party. And I think that elements of the party were either killed, imprisoned, and some of them even went into exile. When I was in Sweden one time, I met a Swedish guy with the name of Ramses. And I said, "Are you Swedish?" He said, "No, I'm Egyptian." His parents were members of the Egyptian Communist Party who were forced into exile by Nasser back in the 1950s. So whatever, are they completely disappeared from the scene and are no longer a player in the Egyptian political drama that is still unfolding? My third point has to do with Dodong Nemenzo's analysis, which I appreciate entirely, since I myself admit that I have a very strong streak of anarchism in me. But the point about Ed's 1986, for example, where according to you, Dodong, it was the most organized and most ideologically oriented groups that took over assumed power. But one of the most organized and highly ideological groups at that time was also the Philippine left, more specifically the CPP NDF forces. But yet they did not have a chance at all in even having a share of the power after Cory Aquino took over. How would you explain that? Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
In relation to the Mahdi's question about external players, aside from the US, how about the Organization of Islamic Countries? Where are they in this whole situation? And external players from the grassroots, if there have been some kind of social movements, support or link, both for the old and new social movements within the region and also outside?
Are there any other questions? Yes, please.
Good morning, Professor Al-Sayyid. I'm Lucio BP Director from the Asian Center. I'm a graduate student. My observation on the MENA region, Middle East and North Africa, is that in terms of political configuration, they seem to have the tendency for a predisposition for a strongman rule. How will this revolution in Egypt will this be a departure from the popular predisposition ng Arab countries to put their hopes on a strong man? In relation to that, I observed that the military plays a very strong role in Middle Eastern politics. Do you think that this promise of Tahrir Square would be any different from the previous administrations in terms of maybe putting civilian supremacy over the military? Do you think that this revolution can institutionalize that? Marginalize the role of military in terms of politics. And my last point is on the Coptic Christians, especially in the South. We have heard so much about the Muslim constituencies. How will this revolution change the plight of Coptic Christians? So I have heard that there have been so many migrations of Coptic Christians going out of Egypt because of historical discrimination or prejudice. How will this revolution change it? A final point will be about Israel. How will this revolution impact on relations between Egypt and Israel? Thank you.
We will have one more question, then our speakers can answer these questions, and then we go back to the audience again for another round or set of questions. Thank you. So for this round, we call Professor Emeritus.
Thank you for this very timely presentation. I think many of us are really interested. And doing the comparisons that Dr. Nemenzo, for example, is illustrating. In the media that we see on the TV, the masses of people in Tahrir Square, what I always was looking for was where are the women in this? And you see them here and there, but definitely it looks like it's a very male-dominated, at least expression, public expression. And again, we say, well, Islam is a different society, etc. But I would really like to explore that a bit more, because in comparing with the Philippines, for example, the so-called new social movements are really civil society organizations. And in this country, they emerged very much out of the Marcos period and became very women-dominated now, although they were much more mixed in leadership before. So now that civil society organizations here have a very strong women leader dominance, although of course there are also men there. And the organization, the grassroots, I know the urban informal settlements are mainly women-led also. And we are hopeful that somehow this brings a new kind of political orientation, although we're not sure because of the whole gender issues in mobilizing and protest. So I wonder if you would comment on apparently your civil society organizations were really repressed during the Mubarak period. You're trying to bring them out now, the old ones plus some new developments, but Professor Nemenzo's point, can you catch up? Even we, wonder how fast can we go for social reform? Gender certainly, I think, in this country is very significant. And I wonder, not just gender, but where are the civil society movements now in your country, and how much does the gender situation affect it?
We start with Professor Al-Sayyid.
Thank you very much for all these questions. To what extent was, what happened in January 2011 unpredictable? I was not completely spontaneous in the sense that there was a call for big demonstrations on the 25th of January. This was well known. I received on the internet a call by, I think, 25 entities called for a big demonstration on the 25th of January. So this was known. that there would be a big demonstration. Some people are preparing for a big demonstration on the 25th of January. And the date was, I think, luckily chosen, because the 25th of January, is used to be celebrated as the police day in the country. So with all the brutalities of the police, I myself was, quite enthusiastic to take part in this. This is no day to celebrate the police. So it was, in this sense, I think it was, planned that there would be something. But I think in the beginning, the initial demands were quite modest. End of the state of emergency, releasing political prisoners, but there was no call for, change of the regime. The call for revolution came later on. So I think the planning for something on the 25th of January, I think I have to definitely did precede what happened in Tunisia. But what happened in Tunisia was encouraging to people because they, in soccer, the Egyptian and the Tunisian teams, often, play together. And there is a sort of competition. So I think the feeling among the militants was that if the Tunisians could do it, then we could do the same. So it was as in soccer the same thing. If they beat us, then we can beat them. So I think that, but there was already the intention to organize something on the 25th of January. But what was surprising is the amount of popular support for what happened there. I think those who planned the demonstration did not expect, they said perhaps, 10,000 people would come. I said myself, since the most successful demonstration of the gathered, 7,000 people, I said, if those people can mobilize 10,000 people, they will be very successful. So I think what was unpredictable is the amount of popular support. There are some estimates that at a certain moment, 18 million people descended into the streets, calling for Mubarak's departure. So why, I think spontaneity could be also explained. And I think could be explained by, the mistakes that Mubarak did. Of course, the impact of neoliberal policies that has affected, large numbers of people, including privatization of the public sector. The economic policy of Egypt, judged by the IMF, was successful. Egypt was not a disastrous economic situation. But what happened is that certain groups of people benefited very much. Other groups of people did benefit. I mean, Egypt was not a country where unemployment was massive, poverty was everywhere. It was a developing economy, but the fruit of development definitely were far from being fairly shared by the people. At the same time, also, Mubarak's regime was not really the worst. My Egyptian friends, would be, surprised when they hear what I'm going to say. It was not the worst in the Arab world. We did enjoy a certain degree of freedom of expression before. We had independent newspapers which were quite critical of Mubarak's regime. We had also independent TV channels, satellite channels, on which there were talk shows very critical of the regime. Also, many of these movements, could operate, Kifaya does not have legal standing. And I was surprised that, I would go, there is, a certain place, in the beginning, I think, the first meeting I attended with leaders of Kifaya, we had to go outside of Cairo to the farm, owned by, a colleague of ours, in order to escape, any police, surveillance. But later on there was a certain flat. We used to meet in a certain flat. I'm sure it was not to the police. And Kifaya had no legal status. So Mubarak's regime did allow a certain degree of freedom for civil society, human rights groups. The number of human rights organizations did increase tremendously. So I think the fact that the country enjoyed a certain degree of freedom of expression, a certain degree of freedom of association, the encouragement of the introduction of the internet, that was in fact a project of Mubarak. Mubarak was very proud, to have introduced computers and the internet. Access to the internet was very easy, So, in fact, unintentionally, Mubarak did help promote the revolution. unwittingly. So spontaneity, is not just, completely unpredictable, but because, if you have, social discontent and freedom of expression and freedom of association, then it's just a matter of time before, this discontent explodes into a revolution. Then the two other, blunders committed by Mubarak. One was the legislative elections of the fall of 2010. It was really ridiculous. Before the elections, we used to spend time, as political scientists, predicting what will happen. Mubarak was interested in eliminating the presence of the Muslim brothers from the People's Assembly, but he would replace them by, a large number of the loyal opposition. And there were, almost quarrels, how many seats this loyal opposition would get. And then, the election came and all the opposition was completely eliminated. And the popularity of the NDP, the National Democratic Party, was, at its lowest. So when you have, and really heavy-handed methods were used in this election. So whenever I met any of my political scientist colleagues, and just before, after the election, as soon as we see each other, we laugh. We don't expect, the results of the election to be that ridiculous. So this is, I think, one major mistake. The other one was trying to push his son to succeed him. And, his son had no popularity whatsoever. And it was known, and in fact, this is the reason that the armed forces intervened, that, sometime in the spring of 2011, Mubarak would push succession by his son. And, the son was completely unpopular. They don't have, the intelligence to establish links with opposition groups, civil society organizations. So I think these are all, the factors which, made Egypt ripe for a revolution in January 2011. So it really required just, some people to take the first step, and they would be followed by the rest. Yeah, it is a leaderless revolution. This is, very true. In fact, this is one of the dilemmas of the revolution. The revolutionaries really did not want to exercise power, and they trusted the army, to be in charge of the revolutionary transition. And this problem was aggravated after the revolution because, maybe it started with a certain number of groups, but then there were, dissensions, disagreements among these groups. So, the revolutionary forces, the new social movements, weakened themselves by dissension and splits amongst them after the revolution. Internet was useful, but I think it was not the only means of communication. The new social movements relied also on, oral communication and human contact. I knew this from some of the militants. So they told me that they used to travel in the country in order to inform, others what they should do. And when the internet was suspended, when internet services were suspended, the revolution continued. And in fact, suspension of the internet was disastrous for security forces. So they still needed the internet, mobile phones, to communicate with each other. So with the internet suspended, even security forces could not coordinate their actions. But people used, the human communication as a way to make up for the suspension of the internet. Yeah, a very good question. What delayed elections could have done? This is really, the big disagreement between the new social movements and the old social movements was about, whether, we should start with the constitution or elections. And, supporters of the old social movements would say, even if we have elections for the Constituent Assembly, it would be won by supporters of the old social movements. So it does not make any difference whether we start with the Constitution or we start with elections, because the fact that the old social movements have so much support in the country would make them win any election, whether this election is for establishing a Constituent Assembly or for running a legislature. So, but still, I would think that it would have been better, perhaps, to agree on a constitution and then later on move to the election of legislature, because in this case at least the constitution will not be far from being the secular one than one which would be made under the control of the old social movement. Yeah, I think many American officials, the last one to recognize this was someone who is in charge of Gallup in the Gulf. Her name is Diliman. She works with, she is the advisor to President Obama. You know that President Obama appointed a veiled woman. She is of Egyptian origin. She is an American citizen of Egyptian origin. She is Muslim. She is veiled. He appointed her to be his advisor on Muslim countries, and she is residing now in the Gulf. I think in Dubai, and she is running the Gallup Regional Center. And she said that the American officials do not know what to do with the Arab Spring. It's so true that it was the machination of the U.S. In fact, when U.S. officials came to Egypt, and one of them, I think you know him very well, Frank Wisner, who negotiated the end of the U.S. military base here. He was ambassador to Egypt, and he was sent by President Obama to find out the situation in Egypt. And he met Hosni Mubarak. This was during the revolution. He met Hosni Mubarak and came out of the meeting praising the sincere intention of Hosni Mubarak to introduce reforms, and the U.S. was behind Mubarak. So it was really a problem for the U.S. Why is it a problem for the U.S.? Because in fact, anti-Israeli sentiment is mounting after the revolution. The pipeline which takes Egyptian natural gas to Israel has been exploded 9 times. 9 times. So every time the government, there is an agreement to export Egyptian natural gas to Israel, and this has been continuing. And this was an object of popular discontent, to the extent that some people went to the courts and got a court ruling that this deal to export Egyptian natural gas to Israel was illegal. So there is a court ruling against this. But the government refused to implement this. So some people, I don't know who did this, did place explosives under this pipeline, and this happened 9 times. 9 times. And the Israeli embassy was attacked in Cairo, and Egypt has now better relations with Hamas. So I mean, who is this intelligent U.S. member of the administration who would engineer change that would worsen relations with Israel and would make the U.S. extremely unpopular in the region as well? No, I don't think the U.S. has anything to do with this. But as usual, Americans try to claim that everything that is happening in the world is they're doing. Really has nothing to do with the U.S. Now on the external relations, because I'm talking about external relations, Arab Gulf countries are quite apprehensive about what happened in Tunisia, Egypt, Libya later on, and Saudi Arabia in particular, Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, were quite critical of what happened, and this is manifested in the fact that they promised Egypt to offer some economic assistance. Very little of it came. I think they are afraid of the repercussions of what happened in Egypt in their own countries. And immediately following the Egyptian revolution, King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia raised salaries of Saudis, I don't know, doubled the salaries of Saudis, allowed any Saudi who would like money, to get money from the government. So, as usual, this petro politics, or real, some people call it real power, not real power, real power. This is, using real, the currency of Saudi Arabia, in order to, quell popular discontent. So I think it's quite disturbing, particularly to governments in Gulf countries. Now, what was the impact of the world civil society? I think this, there are stories, this could be true, that members of one of these new social movements April 6th, went to Serbia and learned, some of the techniques of, peaceful protest. I think this, I know speakers. I'm not sure of the story of Serbia that, members of the new social movement went, and learned something. Yeah? And there was an interest, this, I could, testify, myself. On the part of the Open Society Institute, it was interested in getting Egyptians to know about what happened in Eastern Europe. So I know the person in the Open Society Institute who came to Cairo in order to promote this idea of studying what happened in Eastern Europe. And one of the human rights organizations, did hold a conference comparing what happened in Eastern Europe to what may happen in the Arab world. There were also contacts between the anti-war movement, which was very active before the Iraq invasion. It did organize a meeting, international meeting in Cairo, which I attended. There is also one group which is interested in promoting non-violent protest. I do receive, its journal through the internet. I attended one of its conferences, and I knew that some of the militants did take part in activities organized by this group. So I think perhaps the world civil society may have something, but still I think people could have learned about these things. But I think there is some story to be told about this. The intersection. The intersection could be seen in some of the methods. So the old social movements do use the internet, do use mobile phones and text messages. But I think, there is one group of young Islamists, in fact, have joined. I belong to a leftist party in Egypt. It's called the Popular Socialist Alliance. So this party, in the last election, established a sort of coalition with some other groups, including liberal and leftist groups, and including also the young Islamists. They call themselves the Egyptian current. So the intersection could be seen in the young Islamists who were active in promoting the revolution. They were there from the very beginning. And in fact, it is they who persuaded the leadership of the Muslim Brotherhood to join in. And during the election, they did not join the old social movements, but they joined, in fact, the most radical of the political parties. Relatively speaking, the Popular Socialist Alliance is the most radical. So I think this could be the intersection. I read this for what happened to the left. Well, our party got something like 2.5% of the popular vote, and we celebrated this. We had a meeting of, I think, they bring old people like myself into a council, and we were meeting last week, and we were happy that we got something like 700,000 people voting for a party which has, legally has existed only for a few months, and it has no money. I was asked to contribute money to this party, and I paid some money, but of course I do not have much money to pay. So if they come to me, it means that they are really in a desperate situation. So it got 2.5% of the vote, and with 9 members of the party, and that was considered big success. Why? This is not only the case of the left in Egypt. I would offer my speculation on this. I think this is the historical moment of populism. This is not the right moment either for liberals or for leftists. The liberals and the leftists have nothing to offer with what is happening now in the US and Europe in terms of the economic situation and the desperate financial situation of the US, France, Italy, Spain, Ireland. It is very difficult to claim that capitalism has the solution to all problems, and it is very difficult. I'm an old socialist, but when people ask me which model people don't like to offer them ideas, but they like to offer them concrete examples. A political party should point to some countries where socialism is successful. So which country? Should we refer to North Korea or to Cuba? So this is not the moment either for liberalism or socialism, but this is the moment for populism, populist ideas that rely very much on, issues of identity, that would gloss over, differences, social divisions, etc. So I think this is perhaps the historical situation why the left is not doing very well. Also, I think people have not really critically examined this issue, have not really critically examined what happened in the Soviet Union, and have not come up with better ideas, how to run a socialist economy. Should we go back to public ownership of means of production, central planning? Still, there are people who believe in these ideas. I think we have to be more. The modernist should be more innovative. Should offer new ideas, and I think this is a big challenge. Also, the left remains largely a middle class movement. Very few workers were present in the meeting that I attended. I think there was only someone of workers' background, but I think the others were mostly intellectuals, artists, etc. Very little presence among the workers. Yeah, I think still I would hesitate to call what happened in Egypt a military coup d'etat, because there have been important changes. The power of business in politics, I think, has been, I wouldn't say curtailed definitively, but definitely has been reduced. We had 6 ministers of private business background in the last government of Mubarak. They were dropped, and there are no ministers of business background in the government. So, the power of big business in particular has been, reduced tremendously. Also, the important thing is, of course, the emergence of youth, but the most important is change of political culture. The political culture of Egyptians has changed, and the political culture in the Arab world also has changed. I brought with me, an article published by a colleague at Harvard, and she is brilliant, and she was talking about, the rootedness of authoritarianism in the Arab world. And I have a chapter in a book, I think, titled Durability of Authoritarianism. So, the question of durability of authoritarianism in the Arab world was, the favorite theme of Middle East specialists. Now I think, all this is complete trash, because, people in Syria, and Tunisia, and Egypt wanted to have, of course, they did not use the word democracy, but they wanted a government accountable to the people. And it's not only a matter of change of mentalities, but it's a matter of change of behavior, collective behavior. So the number of strikes, marches, protest actions by ordinary people, peasants, workers, poor government employees, these have, skyrocketed in Egypt during the last few months. So there has been really a change of political culture, and this would make any government in Egypt unstable, because people have learned how to rebel. If they don't like what the government is doing, they will not remain quiet. They will go and express their discontent. So I think this is very important. Now the civil-military relations, this is a good question, and there was a debate in Egypt about the future position of the army. What constitutional provisions would be drafted to regulate this question of civil-military relations. And the military council insisted that its budget should not be examined by the People's Assembly. The military would present to the Assembly just one figure. We want, $300 billion. That is, and then secondly, no legislation, concerning armed forces could be presented without consultation with the armed forces. And there was, uproar in the country against this. So, but I guess, now one of the differences between the old social movements and the new movements is that the old social movements are more accommodative of the role of the army. So they are willing to reach a compromise. But the compromise is that still the budget would be presented, but not to the whole assembly, So either the budget would be examined by one committee of the People's Assembly, Committee of National Defense and Security, or it could be examined by another body, not the National Security Council, which would be made up of civilians and the military people. So there will be a sort of compromise on this. And the other point about any legislation concerning the armed forces being the object of consultation, I think this will have to take place. No government would think of presenting a law about the armed forces without, I think it has to consult with the armed forces. So, but I think the most serious question was that the new social movements would like to bring members of the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces to trial. So they think they are part of Mubarak's regime and they are corrupt and should be put on trial. So I think this is quite an explosive matter. And they are asking for immunity. And interestingly enough, I was surprised when I read about this in March. March, just 2 months or less than 2 months after the revolution, the military introduced a law that bans the trial of former military before civilian courts. So they were, quite concerned that, once they leave the military, they might be object of, legal investigation. So now there is also, while the army was in power, after the revolution, many civilians were killed, were shot by, military police. And some people are asking for, accountability. So again, on the part of the old social movements, there was an idea suggested that perhaps the army could pay money for victims, or for the families of victims. And this was, in fact, presented by a member of the Muslim Brotherhood, and other people revolted against this. So I think, civil military relations are, quite crucial. But as I said, since the old social movements will have the upper hand in the future parliament, they might come to a compromise on this. The Coptic situation, definitely there is, concern in the Coptic community that the rising influence of the old social movements could impact negatively on the position of the Copts, particularly the Salafists in particular, who don't recognize, the principle of citizenship. Now, the good news is that the Muslim Brothers don't like to enter into coalition with the Salafists. So the Salafists would remain in the opposition, but there have been an increase in the number of attacks against, Coptic churches in the country. The situation is calming now, and during the election there were no attacks on Copts. And with the celebration of Christmas attended by prominent people of the Muslim Brotherhood, and also of there has been the Sheikh Al-Azhar, has played a very important role, has suggested several times documents that call for respect for freedom of belief, freedom of expression, and the last document was presented last week in a meeting which was attended by the Coptic Pope. So there is, deliberate effort on the part of, Al-Azhar and the Muslim Brothers in order to, assure Copts Christians that, they are not going to suffer. And this is quite, ironic, because during the revolution, prayers were performed in the Tahrir Square by Muslims and Christians, next to each other. So, this is also one of the rising reflections about the revolution. That during the revolution, this spirit of, respect for citizenship, respect for difference was there. But after the revolution, difference became, an object of persecution. I relate this also to the question of women. I read a piece of statistics that during the revolution, 40% of the participants were women. I did not try to count, but on several visits to the Tahrir Square, there was a large number of women. So women were quite active. Women were quite active also among the leaders. One of the persons who are accused of being the agent of American imperialism is Asma something there. So, and one was tried recently, Nawar, so women were quite active in the revolution. The last statement that civil society did exist, under Mubarak, and in fact was, unwittingly Mubarak promoted the revolution by allowed all these movements to operate under the law.
Out of time. Unfortunately, we will end abruptly, but before we do so, maybe Professor Nemenzo can give a few words.
Reactions. The strength, the impact of a urban insurrection depends so much on whether the extent to which it can mobilize, it can generate what you call the bandwagon effect. The difference between today's situation and before, before the age of the internet, we have to mobilize what you call a critical mass around which the spontaneous crowd can gather. But now it seems that you can mobilize a big demonstration even without a critical mass. If you have up this group in the, I don't know if it's in the United States, it's called We Are Anonymous. We are able to mobilize people without, just by sending out messages through the Facebook. So this is probably, we do not downgrade a mass upheaval just because it relies so much on bandwagon effect. In fact, the bandwagon effect is an important part of mobilization. Another point is, what happens to this single issue civil society groups after the fall of the dictatorship? Because when the dictatorship is there, only the brave ones get involved. But after the fall of the dictatorship, after 1986 in the Philippines, for example, there was a proliferation of these civil society groups, many of which depend so much on foreign funding. And that is when groups like the Institute for Peace, which is very active in Mindanao, I think it is a front of the CIA, because the head of that is also the resident director of the CIA in the Philippines. And then you have the Open Society of Soros. You have the Freedom House. This is the time when they become very active in trying to influence these so-called civil society groups. And, well, anyway, the other point that I would like to make is that maybe that addressed to me, that it is true that in EDSA 1, this is overthrow of Marcos, the organized left, the CPP-ABA, was marginalized, or rather they marginalized themselves. But do not forget that also took over the traditional politicians, the Tratos, also ideologically, they have their own ideology. They were more ideologically sophisticated than many of the spontaneous participants. They were well organized. They just, and they have enormous finances. So it was still the traditional groups, these organizations that. Now you asked about the Egyptian left. I told you about attending a conference organized by Samia Amin 2 years ago. And many of the Egyptians there were openly saying that they are communists. They were members of the old Communist Party before it was dissolved. But now they are engaged in organizing of managing think tanks. And they are all very old. In their company, I felt that I was young. So they have not been able to attract new people. And apparently they were tolerated even by Mubarak for as long as they do not organize into a political movement. If it's just think tank and environmental groups. Apparently they were tolerated, even if they openly say that they are communists. I think that's the tragedy of the communists in many countries, and I'm just afraid that it's also going to happen to us.